Welcome. I'm Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews. Today, I have a really special guest that's going to be speaking with us today. His name is Ira Yuspeh. He's the co-owner of M&I Recording in Manhattan, in New York City, in the Film Center building, one of the legendary buildings, and he has a legendary studio. I'd like to bring Ira in and say hello. Ira, how are you today?
Good, Al. Thanks for having me. Looking good.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's great to see you, Ira. Yeah.
Uh, yep. Well, we started back. We started back in the late '70s. Mitch is my partner and brother, and
Yeah.
we were playing club dates for many years. And I was doing musical theater as well. And
What kind of musical theater were you doing?
I was actually doing things like Hair and Godspell Hair, all of these
Yeah.
musicals.
Singer and actor?
Yes, I played the lead in Hair. It was an interesting one. And I was also in a comedy group. And Mitch and I started hanging out at a club in New York called Catch a Rising Star.
Yeah.
Richard Belzer was the MC. He became a good friend. Pat Benatar, who, as you know, hit me with your best shot.
What?
She used to record in our apartment. We had like a 4-track TAC and a Fender Rhodes, and
Yeah, I had the same stuff.
yeah, we all had the same stuff. But as you know, you start thinking, boy, if I only had this, if I only had that, I could be so much better. And we knew all these musicians from club dates, so we started thinking maybe we can do this.
Right.
So we got the funds together, and then we decided, well, it was expensive then to build a studio. We didn't want to build one down in the 30s. We said, let's do it up by Broadway where all the musicians are, all the horn players, all the string players, and would help us get work. So we actually opened in 1978.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know.
So 1978. So you built it in the Film Center building. That was the first place that you.
Yeah, we built it on the 14th floor. We took over about 4,000 square feet.
4,000 square feet?
Right. In those days, it was an orchestral-sized room.
Yes.
And in 2006, we downsized. Instead of 2 studios, we downsized to 1 studio.
Okay.
And then a year and a half ago, we moved into a new studio on the 10th floor, also in the Film Center building. Beautiful studio. It was designed by Wycliffe John's designer.
Oh, so it was already built when you moved in?
Already built, fully floating. It was just a lucky break because they wanted to gut the 14th floor.
Right. So let me ask, because we went so fast through 42 years. Because so who did you start recording with in M&I? Because I know you have a wall of fame over there that has some of the greatest artists of all time on your wall, with pictures of you and of course your brother.
It took a couple of years. We started with like people we knew, friends, and of course people through Catch a Rising Star and people who were on the way up. Our first big star was B.B. King.
Oh wow.
And that was on his 50th birthday. So they had a big party at the studio. I actually still have the amplifier that he left there.
Yeah, he left an amplifier.
I know, he had to have a Gibson amp because he was endorsing it. So, and BB was great. And then we started working for Blue Note Records. We did Lou Rawls, Lena Horne, a lot of great jazz, rhythm and blues. And being that we were by Broadway, we started working with Henry Krieger of Dreamgirls and Martin Charnin, all these great Broadway people. And since we were also in the Film Center building, we found opportunities to start writing music for film and for television.
So what kind of television themes did you work on?
Well, when they had, I don't know if you remember, in the 80s, they had a baseball strike.
Yeah.
Baseball was off, and we had a band, which was the original reason for building the studio, was to try to get our band out there. But life has other plans. And we had a song called Diamond Dust about how these kids are playing softball and they hear the crowds in their head when they catch the ball, never make it to the major leagues, but their fantasy is there. So we sent it to NBC. Yeah. And that led us to be offered to write the Baseball Game of the Week theme for NBC. And we wrote sports music for them for like about 5-6 years, and then continued writing for the Yankees, the Rangers over at MSG Network. As a matter of fact, I think you contributed quite a few pieces for
Well,
us as
you
well.
had a music library at the time. Well, and that's I don't know if it's actually a library or whatever you called it, but other people were writing, and that's really how I met you. Came in there to do a project, and then he asked me if I write, and I said sure. You said, "Hey, write me X amount of instrumental tracks with your rocky guitar, and we'll get on." Next thing I know, you did get our music, and I think it was maybe on the Mets or for one of the basketball, and we
On top of the themes, they had highlight music for almost every like replay, recap of all the games and all. And that turned out to be a great business. And what I found is you just have to stay in business.
yeah
You have to be able to pivot.
pivot.
So, so when things were slow, we had a guy in our building who was selling old movies, B movies, to Europe to put on TV.
Right.
And they had to redub it from English, but they only had the movie track. They needed somebody to wipe the track, put in the footsteps again, put in the music and all. So
Wow.
there was about a 3-4 year period where we must have done about 200 movies.
Yeah.
To get effects tracks so they could dub it into another.
So you did the voiceovers in your studio too, of course.
No, just whenever there was talking in the film,
Yeah.
would wipe the track and put back footsteps or music or whatever they needed. Nowadays, everybody's smart enough. Now everybody does a music and effects mix.
Yeah.
And they mix their
That's
movie.
incredible how one thing led to the other. So really doing the sports music at NBC really lasted quite a while. So of course you were the first one that even told me about ASCAP. But performance. You were.
Look at you now. Are you BMI or ASCAP?
Well, as a writer, I'm with ASCAP. As a publisher, of course, I'm with all three, ASCAP, BMI, and so I knew nothing about that and that end of the business. And really, because of you guys, that really put me into where I developed a long relationship with music for TV and film also. So I give you a lot
to be part of the history, man. Actually, back in the late 80s, and that's when the jingle business started closing down. I mean, during the early 80s, there was still plenty of jingle business out there.
Yeah.
So the studio was really doing well because the jingle, you had to go to a recording studio. It's not like today where you could flip up GarageBand or something. And Mitch and I knew that when synthesizers started coming in and all of this stuff, that we wanted to stick with classical Broadway jazz, the kind of music that people have to still come to a studio.
Right.
Because we saw the jingle business was starting to go into people's little home studios.
Right.
Until they did the demo business was gone. And then Mitch and I came up with the idea of doing musical messages for your answering machine.
Right. Crazy calls.
And we bought an ad on USA Network for Crazy Calls. Nobody's home.
So
and
that was you guys came. That's your invention or whatever you call it.
We ended up selling that was our big hit. We ended up selling close to 1 million cassettes.
Cassettes.
3-minute cassettes.
Right.
For $14.95 back in the day.
Wow.
Incredible. And the only way we were able to stay on TV was because we couldn't afford to buy time on all of the cable channels. It was much cheaper then, was to cut deals with all of them for when they had free time and have them run it and give them a third.
So you had to make deals with it.
We had to make deals to close everybody out.
I always learned that no deal walks.
No deal walks. That's correct. And then we sprung that into like a whole bunch of product lines like Power Walk and Power Run, fantasy walking and running tapes, and Christmas sing-along kits, and haunted horror house tapes. And
you were really at the forefront of that type of that side of the business, I believe.
At the time, I mean, I never knew retail-wise, the Crazy Calls was really successful on TV, but it took no time for like 5 copycats to get their version out in the stores. But
once it was out, of course, it's anybody's market then.
Anybody's market. That's right.
change it up with their own. But real, hey, but you get credit as the number one.
Yeah, and we had the TV locked up
And
at the time.
yeah, exactly. That's incredible. So you really went through a lot of different changes.
You
Being,
have to.
I still remember that picture of Leon Redbone on your wall.
Yes,
And then,
Leon Redbone. We used to keep a bottle of Jägermeister for him.
oh,
That's how he claimed was the only way he can get that good deep brown. But we had like Dr. John, who was fantastic, Phoebe Snow, a lot of. We were really lucky to be able to get
right.
somebody great.
And a lot of the session players favored you. Also, the guys like Will Lee and Paul.
Right. Paul Schaefer and that whole crew, and just the best, especially since we were doing jingles every day. It was the top musicians in the city. Right. And not to mention the Rue, Alloyd and the Interplanetary Division.
And that was my first recording in there was with a band there. And I remember I did one guitar track there with a guy named Shard Haynes. You remember Crazy Shard?
I have to refresh my memory on that one.
But anyway, he wanted to get this crazy sound, so I had a Marshall stack upside down on the side, blasting into the air, microphones from every side, just to get the perfect guitar sound.
Those were the days where you'd like, sorry, those were the days when you'd like hang a vat of Jello from the ceiling and have somebody holding two things of water and say, "Don't move, that's the sound. That's the sound. Hold it.
Well, it's true. I mean, that was crazy when you talk about guys like Jimi Hendrix and all these people. Of course, they were looking for the sound where a lot of times now you plug it in, you put on your Zoom, you put on your effects pedal. It has every sound. You tweak a little bit, and that's your sound. Then you really had to search and for that right sound. So the producer really had hands-on on trying to make unique sounds.
And you had to, at that time, record it with that sound because you didn't have the amount of outboard gear and stuff to be you could mess with it later.
Right.
But if you found a sound you liked, we used to always go for it. Let's get.
So that's correct. I mean, to have a live room for that long. So most of the time it was a live room. I mean, you had the live room. Of course,
and we still do have the live room. We still have.
Most of the time, you had the big room. Then you went down one where you consolidated a bit.
Right. We went from a room that could hold maybe 20 musicians or 25 musicians to a room that could hold 10 to 12.
Right. Okay. Great.
And
you had to go with the time that probably the rent went up. Business is different, but.
We had this big hallway with cabinets that we had to keep 2-inch tapes on because you needed a lot of space. And it's always rough walking down that hallway when you're not using tape anymore and say, God, $60 a square foot, I'm paying to store tape cabinets, So we, as New York real estate went up, we decided we just needed our good.
That's part of being a good businessman, the two of you and your brother, seeing the science, adapting very quickly to it so that it didn't put you out of business,
Well,
yeah.
That's it, and not to mention that we were also doing, on top of the live sessions, we were also doing our own things. So we set it up so we had what we needed.
Great.
That worked. And then finally we, up until today, we started getting involved with some cable TV companies.
Okay.
And I think I was talking to you the other day that fortunately, even with COVID, we are able to work remotely. Most voiceover people have booths in their house. I'm not going to say they have equal quality booths or microphones, but usually the good ones do.
Yeah, I'm sure people that do it as a profession might have
voiceover.
Of course. So, what kind of equipment are you using so there's no lag time, because obviously the stuff is live, right?
Right. Well, we used to, we've been doing this for a while with NFL Films, where they would record the narration for their shows at our studio through ISDN.
ISDN line.
We were grandfathered into that. They don't give out ISDN lines anymore for a reason. It's expensive.
Yeah.
We had to have 4 telephone lines
Wow.
to do 24-bit stereo going in and coming back.
So that's how it worked on 4 different lines.
Well, for us, we did because the NFL needed 24-bit.
Wow. Incredible.
So if it was 16-bit, we would need 2.
Okay.
But what happened was, they charge you by the time you're on, and for the monthly 4-line service, and it gets expensive. So the NFL, they decided that they wanted to switch to a codec, and now we use something called a zip telos box, which is similar to what all these other boxes are. It's through the internet.
Okay.
And it's in real time.
Right.
And you could get, 24-bit quality. So
incredible. Wow. So you really, I mean, this whole conversation is about, of course, making great music and focusing on what you like to do, going to recording, but really your adaptability to stay in business through the changing times. So to be in business for 42 years is really, really super commendable. You
can't be stuck in your original dream. You have to just it's the old where the journey takes you.
Right.
By the way, the other equipment which is free that a lot of voiceover guys use is like Sound Connect now, just like Zoom.
Oh yeah.
And
I know Zoom, the lag time is a little tough, and
right.
We're all on our, this is even, we're doing this now. I'm lucky we could do it, but it is like a residential connection, so to speak, so,
we're all residential now, right?
Right, that's true. But
I'm lucky that I could walk to the studio if I need to,
So you could walk if you had to, right?
If I have, well, it's the only way. I mean, I could take it that way, but.
So yeah, because you did mention that the other day we were going to do the interview, and then you said, Murphy's Law, I have a session. So I go, great, man, take the session, of course. So you still can do business, because that obviously was the focus that made these interviews have the quarantine. Of course, you're now quarantined, but you're still somehow being able to work. So do you have to go back to your studio, or are you remote from your studio as well?
I go to the studio because I don't have the setup at home. But again, I'm not doing music, obviously, because, I'm not going to put musicians in a room and have that risk. So I walk in, I'm at the studio myself. The TV companies, the networks, they send me the video. And then the voiceover guy is at his house, and we do it through either Sound Connect or sometimes just on the phone listening in. And email it to me.
Wow.
And then if there's music that they have, they send it to me. If I'm finding music, and then I just put the spot together and email.
That's incredible.
Very relaxing. You're by yourself.
Yeah, right. It's incredible.
It's not the old let's get together and jam, that kind of fun, but it's what it is.
Right. No, that's great. Great that you're still able to adapt to it, because, a lot of the live players that I've been interviewing, obviously, they thought they were going to be off a little time, and now it's June, September. I mean, I also still play in orchestras. I do this summer show at Plays in the Park. I usually do 3, full production shows. They canceled 2 of them. The last one, it's still on the schedule, but I could imagine any day that might be canceled. So we don't really know when we're going to go back to live performances. But
musicians used to all the time. We still do it, and we used to do it way back when, where we used to send 2-inch tapes. And I'm sure people have done this with you, where you put your guitar down.
That's right.
And then just send the tape back, and we mix it. Now they just do it through through email. It's
right, or somebody could send you the stems or just the mix, and then you put it into your own Pro Tools setup and do a guitar track or a voice. Or
there are certain players, like Elliot Randall, other people that's what everybody does. They just send him the tracks. And he does his thing and sends it back. So
right, and he does what he does. That's why you give it to him. He's going to send you back The perfect. I remember Quincy once said in an interview when he hired um, to do the Beat It solo. What's
Right,
his name? Who's the guitar? Eddie Van Halen.
right.
Yeah, and Eddie goes, "Hey, you hired me," and Quincy said, "You know, I hired you," and Eddie said, "Well, what do you want me to play?" And Quincy said, "Why you asking me? That's why I hired you." So a great producer, because you also produce a lot of things, is also getting the right guy. Like you said, they send it to Elliot Randall. They just trust. They may give him some ideas, play around here, play there. I want something like this, but then Elliot, the guitarist, does his signature work. Sends
I haven't recently sent something to Elliot, but I know that's what he does, and he's great. I mean,
Yeah,
well,
yeah. Not to go off on Elliot, but that's the way it's done as a producer, because you're really in the forefront of producing. So really, really some incredible stuff. So, Ira, I just like to ask you. I know your partners with your brother. That's been obviously a long time. Do you both alternate responsibilities at the studio? Do you go on vacation? He's there running it, vice versa. How do you work that out with a sibling and work so long with each other to make a great partnership?
yeah, actually, it's really interesting because we have a very similar skill set. So, yes, we do. We cover for each other, and even when we used to play club dates, we used to work for this Herb Rose Orchestra. Sometimes, as you know, if you've ever played weddings, sometimes you're in a catering hall where there were like 3 weddings going on at a time. Sometimes Herb Rose would have 2 rooms booked, and Mitch and I switch rooms.
I
Just
just lost your last sentence. Say that one more time, please.
I said that in some of these catering halls back in the day, they'd have 3 weddings at the same time, and Herb Rose used to have 2 bands booked in the same catering hall, and Mitch and I used to switch in the middle of our gigs,
And
wait
no,
and see if anybody noticed that this
did they
different guitar player. But
curly hair? You know. So.
as time goes on, we are more than ever, and because it's a smaller space, we are more than ever covering for each other, and this maybe not having both of us there all at the same time.
Yeah. So as the years go on, obviously you have different interests in life. You have your family. He has his. Uh,
Right.
so you want to take more time off. I know he also has a place down in Florida. So life goes on, and you do.
Life goes on.
I mean, God willing, we get out of this mess. I mean, what do you see in the future for you and M&I Recording?
Well, as I said, it's more of the. I have learned never to predict.
Okay.
All I could say is always keeping your eye open for like something that maybe you could latch on to that could be a good gig for the next 4 or 5 years or this and that. Obviously, we're still doing a lot of Broadway.
Yeah.
We still do our jazz stuff and whatever it is. But I mean, who knows? We do it while it's still fun.
Yeah.
We're still staying in business. And if that
So those of you that are watching, you notice I've been going in and out. The internet is getting a little faulty. I've had many interviews where we went straight through. This interview with Ira right now has been interrupted a lot, and that's something that's been worrying me about the COVID pandemic that's going on. Right now, we see it at surface level. That they said it was a couple of weeks. It's going to be maybe a couple of weeks longer. Then into May, we might be into June. This is a lot of fun, but if it ever got really serious where it cut us out and we could not communicate like this, there could be a whole nother level to what we're facing now with this pandemic. And if it is, I hate to get into cult things or conspiracy things, that maybe it's something bigger than we're all really aware of. So can Ira, it's really been a pleasure and all that speaking with you. Could you just give us a little insight of, like you just said, where you might be going, just like a closing statement of the state of the music industry, the state of evolving and changing, and what's in it for you, and what do you think, a word of closing, please.
Well, obviously, by what you said, I mean, if it reaches a point where I can't have musicians in my studio playing, that's going to take about 90% of the fun out of the work. I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope this is just a passing phase, but I know what you're saying. The business has been so different from when I started 42 years ago.
Yeah.
And people have the ability, as you and I are doing right now, to do so many things in the comfort of their house. I can't tell you how many musicians have their home studios now.
Yeah.
So for me, I think musically, we will, other than the writing and all, it's just a recording studio. We're going to keep sticking to what we do best, which is live recording, which at this point, I think is our jazz, Broadway, and classical clientele.
Yeah, that's great.
And to continue to find opportunities. This year, we were lucky enough, we got to write the theme for Greta Van Sustren's political show, Greta Full Court Press.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that. Oh, that's fantastic.
And I just wrote the theme for her new show called Pet Tales, which is her interviewing celebrities with pets or whatever. And this is a guy that I met back in NBC days, back in the 80s, who now has a production company who's working with a lot of TV production people. And you never know. There could be somebody that comes back into your life like 30 years later.
Well, I love that end of the business myself, is the royalty side of the business too.
Passive income, right?
My phone ring before. That's because I just had something airing on TV. No, I'm just kidding. You
have something airing all the time. The funny thing is it's reversed now. Now I'm giving you music to sell.
That's right. Actually, we do have a couple of commercials that you are collecting.
Yes. Yes. It always makes me smile.
So you do recognize, I think it's called Raggedy Ann. One of the songs. It was an old track.
Than the original, but I love it.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
Right.
So that's great. I just like to thank you again, Ira. It's great to see you. You're an old-time friend, and our hearts are together in this, and it's I
look forward to this thing being over and all of us getting together in person.
Yeah. And I wish your family, safety and all that, your family, your wife and your son, and everybody should be healthy through this and come out the other side stronger than ever.
Ditto, brother. Thank you.
Amen. And, it's a pleasure. God bless you and the family.
All righty. Regards, Al. Thank you.